In today's episode, we talk all about changing habits and setting goals for the new year. How long does it actually take to change a habit? We call bullshit on that 21-day rule that you always hear about, how you use masculine and feminine energy to become successful at those changes, and how to get yourself off that roller coaster, starting and starting again on those goals every year. This is part one. Let's jump in.
Welcome to the Wellness Empowerment Project. I'm Trish.
And I'm Julie. We are two nurses exploring holistic healing and wellness practices to empower you to be the leader of your own health. Join us as we try out new things, or as we call it, weird shit, and have some fun along the way. Hey, Trish.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. What are we talking about today?
I thought it was interesting that we started looking at this little chart to see ebbs and flows throughout the year. Now, granted, it's about podcasts, but I think the timing was interesting. So January, everyone is a high time for people listening. So I totally was thinking, yep, that's everyone's New Year's resolution. We are going to start listening to podcasts and figure out what we want to do. And then just like going to the gym, it drops off in February and everyone feels guilty and starts back again in March. Then April comes and we're done with trying this and slowly creeps up in May and June and July, probably preparing for summertime, and then drops off again in August, probably because we're preparing for school. A quick little boost in October, only to fall down again when the holidays start. I feel like that pattern is very much in line of the patterns that people go through when they're trying to either conquer a New Year's resolution or implement some sort of like new habit. What did you think? That's what I thought when I first saw it.
Yes, I totally agree with your interpretation of this calendar, so to speak, of how people are listening to podcasts. Definitely feels they're looking for ways to change their habits, improve their health, or develop themselves professionally. They're seeking out information to help them with whatever their goal is. They start, they fizzle out, they start again. Definitely. I've followed this pattern myself over and over again, and I'm trying to make it less of a peak and valley and more of a straight line personally.
Yeah, actually, this is the one time I wish people could see this graph because it is. It's very much reflective of an all or nothing mentality. I'm all in and I'm doing it seriously. Then I fall out and I'm not touching anything at all. And I think the all or nothing mentality could be very reflective of peaks and valleys when we are trying to institute any sort of change. So, Julie, why do you think that so many people, I hate to use the word fail, but don't achieve the goals that they set for themselves?
I feel like there's a lot of answers to that. One is they are not fully clear about what they're starting. They have either set themselves up for more than they want to take on. So they're setting this rigid schedule or expectations for themselves, and they're hardcore, all in. They start off, boom, but it's not sustainable. It doesn't really account for daily life. I think the third thing is they lose interest. They don't see the results right away, so they lose interest. What do you
I
think?
think you hit the nail on the head with lots of those. When we're looking at a lot of change, I do follow Changing to Thrive by the James and Janice Prochaska. And they talk about the stages of change. We talk about first the pre-contemplation phase, where we don't necessarily realize there's a change yet. The contemplation phase where you finally realize, okay, it's time for me to maybe take some time to change this. But then there's the preparation phase. And this is a phase where you could act the action is, which is where you're actually taking the aligned action that you chose. After that is the maintenance and termination phase. I think you hit the nail on the head when you were saying that one, not clear, goals are too big. We didn't get them into bite-sized pieces. And three, lose interest because we don't see the results that we want. All those things really is where you need to be focusing in that planning phase. And I think a lot of people are in contemplation. I want to lose weight, or I want to fix this problem. I want to do this. And they go straight into action, or they go to action really quickly. And then the action isn't sustainable.
Yeah. Have you read that book by James Clear, Atomic Habit? I love his philosophy on how you change by making small steps. There's There's a quote from James Clear that is, "Too often we convince ourselves that massive results require massive action." That's where you're taking on too much. You're trying to change everything all at the same time, and it clouds where you're starting from. Then it's too much and it's not sustainable. That's where building things into your daily life and taking those tiny steps will eventually get you to that place.
I think that is where there's some mundaneness to change, right? We all love hearing these stories of, I went from this to that, right? I lost 75 pounds in this much time. I went from making this much money to that much money. But there is a mundane piece that isn't highlighted because it's not always as exciting, but it's all the work that people were doing to get to that point. 'Cause I think what people are saying, I went from here to here, they're only showing that action portion that they were in. They weren't really talking about the preparation phase, the contemplation phase, all the energetics that they were putting in place so they could actually take some of those action steps and all the little things that they were doing on a consistent basis so that they could do these other things that help them to achieve the goal.
Yeah, I think that's part of the human mentality of why we love those change stories so much and such massive change. Because maybe it's just me, but secretly, we all hope that we could just get from here to there instantaneously. And in all actuality, the backstory to what you're seeing on social media is a series of those tiny, mundane steps, decisions that you make on the daily basis. You may not necessarily see the late nights, the early mornings, the meal planning, the training courses that people take, or whatever it is for whatever goal you're going for. You're not seeing the work. You just see the beginning and the end. And you're like, I want that. I want the end. How do I get there like that? Because it looks like it went boom, and there that person was.
Yeah, and to add to that, we're also not seeing, I'll say it, the energetic piece that went through it. Like all the work that brought you to a place where you had the confidence and the courage to take the steps to get to the change. The mindset work that they did to get to the point where they had enough self-worth to create those boundaries. That's not always talked about, but we have to have this combination in order to achieve those goals.
Yeah, I find that when I take on a goal, if I have something that's very rigid and it requires a lot of discipline, I tend to be very successful initially. I want to lose 10 pounds. Okay. And I have a very strict way that I'm eating, the way I'm moving, how I'm sleeping, and I stick to that. Nope, I can't eat cake today because I'm not eating cake right now. But then I can only sustain that for a period of time. Like I can do the discipline side pretty well, but only for so long. And so that's why I continue on that roller coaster of lost the 10 pounds, gained the 10 pounds, lost the 10 pounds, gained the 10 pounds. And my weight trends on my phone probably mimic that map that we were just looking at because I am not incorporating the softer side of how I'm approaching this problem. That's where I feel like over the last several months, I've been thinking I need to actually lean a little bit into the discipline, but I also need to show myself a little more devotion.
Yeah. Oh, first of all, I don't think you're alone. I think it's something we've all done. And yes, we may be talking about like numbers, weight, and money here, but really this could be applied to any goal that we have. But I think there's some reasons why we focus so much and want these quick fixes. And I think one is this misnomer of this 21-day rule to change a habit. I think we've all heard of that and it's bullshit. So in all seriousness, I tried to look back and find where did this come from and is there any data that supports it?
What
So
did you find?
here's what I found. And I also got this confirmed recently as well. Because I actually looked into this 2 years ago because what originally brought me to look into this was from my work with Kundalini Yoga. So in Kundalini Yoga, they are very big on changing habits. But a lot of these habits are also very ritualistic because we're doing things that are changing our frequency. So in their standpoint, it was 40 days to change a habit. But the changing of habit is really you're creating a new experience in your daily life and you're moving through different, you can say, external blocks for that. And if you really granulate that down, even when I've done this myself, usually you start off really high with any change. Let's go, let's have it. I start doing my meditation or my Kriya, which is a set of postures or practices for a specific result. And originally you're like, yes, I'm doing it. Then about 2 weeks in, it starts getting hard, no matter how much time it's for 3 minutes, 11 minutes, whatever you have set up, it starts to become difficult. You have to persevere through. But after that 40-day time point, their second time point was 90 days. And in 90 days, it's in your subconscious space. This habit is more ingrained into your system. At 120 days, you start to see the changes in the way that it's affected your life. So now it's a lot more permanent. And then at 1,000 days, you actually have a master of the habit. But let's stick with the 40, 90, and 120, because here's what I think is interesting. When I looked at the research myself, I found out that this 21-day rule essentially came from some article in the 1960s where some cosmetic surgeon made this statement based upon some self-affirmation. Zero data at all goes with this rule. Now, when you actually look into the studies done about habit creation, it actually has been very hard to pinpoint a specific number of days. There was definitely a range. And I feel like there's a lot of reasons where there could be a range. We're all different. We all have different things that we're working on. We all have different strengths. The best that they were able to do is say, on average, the days to change a habit was 66. I thought it was very interesting that the data showed on average it was 66, but granted hard to pinpoint. In the yoga technology, they said 40 to change the habit and then 90 to get into the subconscious space. I saw that as being very reflective. Little
I
more
love
than 1 day.
I love how some random guy made a statement and how that has become so pervasive in the subculture of professional development or professional growth.
I was actually talking to a coach of mine. She was my coach like maybe 10 years ago. We were friends. We've remained friends. She said it takes 21 days to change a habit. And I'm like, actually, I think to break it to you, but I think this is the big reason why people are not able to make these changes and sustain them. I think that first reason is we are thinking and we have this expectation that we only need to for a short period of time for it to truly ingrain in our system. But a habit is something that is in our subconscious. It's so ingrained in us. So if we really want to change it, unfortunately, we're nowhere near 21 days. We're actually looking at 40, 60, 90 days. The other thing is, if we want to go back to the James and Janice Prachasta, in their research, you're in that action phase. They actually said that you really did not move from, oh, how do I say this? You don't really move to a point where you're not going to essentially like relapse or fall off your change, essentially going from action to maintenance until 6 months, which now is actually a little longer than the yogic 121 days.
So if we're changing the mindset, my initial thought is that completely changes how you are going to approach your goal, because the clarity around what you're trying to achieve and how you're going to get there is now going to have to be broken down into smaller steps in order to get to the big thing. And that just completely spins it around into a different realm. I'm going to take 6 months and I'm going to commit to 6 months to actually make this thing stick versus I'm going to do a 21-day workout program and nutrition program. It's just a completely different mindset.
It forces you to be in the preparation phase for a lot longer too. It forces you to really come up with a true mindful approach. And I think this is also why I appreciate the Kundalini yoga technology, because I like having that. Let's hit the 40 days first. Because sometimes my goal when I start a new practice is I just want to do it for 40 days. But there's a lot that I do for that my goal is to do 90 days. Or even I'm doing 2,000-day meditations right now. And I hit the 40 and I'm like, great. And then I hit the 90 and then I hit the 120. Because it's almost like it can be very reflective in the sense of, okay, this is my larger goal, but I met these marks along the way. And then you can start to see how you have changed through that process.
I will say, though, it also is a little overwhelming when you're starting out on something and you're like, okay, 6 months, committing to 6 months. I could see some folks saying that I'm not doing it. That's the reality. I guess you weren't really in it anyway. But that's where you have to start thinking to yourself, okay, if it is 6 months, what can I actually do? And that concept of 1% more, 1% better per day, that actually is going to take you farther if you're consistent with it over time versus all in for 3 weeks and then you're out.
Right. That's a huge difference because if we look at achieving goal, and maybe we talked a lot about the weight goal, for example, but let's say really the goal is to heal your relationship with food, heal your relationship with your body. If you look at it from a more healing aspect, that's a little more of the feminine energy, we'll say. That's a little more nurturing. And that's very different from the rigidity of this is what I'm taking out of my diet and sticking to this for 3 weeks, all or nothing mentality. I think this brings up that we really want to be successful and make a change in our life. We need to be able to balance the discipline and the commitments, as well as the devotion to the deeper reason why we're doing it.
Let's get into that a little bit more. When you talk about change, what defines the masculine aspects of change management?
I went to Webster again. Let's just first go from a definition standpoint, and then we can look at it from an energetic standpoint. When you look up the word discipline, the words used to define discipline is a controlled behavior from disciplinary training, self control, enforcing compliance or order. So that's what a definition of discipline is. When you look at more masculine energy, it is very action oriented, competitive. There's structure, there's control, but there's also courage, decisiveness, leadership. Nothing's good or bad here, but anything else. Too much of one thing is never really good. Now, if you look up the word devotion, that is more of the act of dedicating something to a cause or activity. And the other word I liked to define devotion was loyalty, being loyal. So that to me is very much reflective of feminine energy where you're more collaborative, creative, flexible, adaptable, nurturing, even intuitive. They're almost like they're two different ways to tackle a problem. If we can implement them both during certain time points, I think you could be more successful.
We all have masculine and feminine energies within ourselves, and we may lean one way more than the other. When we're looking at achieving a goal, we probably lean into one of those energies more so than the other. When somebody has very strong discipline or the masculine energy, what are the things that they need to build up in themselves?
Yes, we all have a little bit of both. We may tend to go towards one side or the other. And it could be even what's been successful in previous, what's worked for us before. I have a couple of friends who really struggle with keeping up with any sort of daily practice or daily change. For me personally, leaning into the discipline, that was one of my strengths. If I needed to get something done, I can get it done. However, when you do that, you get it done, but you get it done and it ends up being a checkbox. And when it's a checkbox, you aren't able to see the meaning of it and the depth of it. And you're not actually getting the change that you desire because you're so focused on getting it done. So there's a lot of rigidity if you're focusing on that side of it, or you can feel like it's very rigid. Also, can be reflective of a lack of self trust. This need for that stability in that routine, and almost like a fear of if I'm out of this routine, what will happen? I don't complete this. If I allow myself to go off this eating pattern for a day, will I be able to get back on? When you're experiencing that, there is this lack of trust as you've attached yourself to this pattern. It's almost this security. I think a couple ways to help move out of it is I do think it's important that we focus on the discipline piece for at least the first 40 days because you want to get this into your system, into your daily routine. But then after that, maybe a good time to start to allow some flexibility, getting in some mindfulness, getting in some journaling, and really align with your intention and your bigger vision. Start to ask yourself some questions. Can I achieve this goal if I cut back a little bit? So, an example, Julie, you mentioned up and down of going of weight. You're really disciplined and you're not allowing yourself having cake. But what happens if we're that rigid in that all or nothing is you have such a tight grip on it. At some point, we're like, screw it. I'm eating all the cake. I'll let myself have it. And it's harder to get back on the horse again. At least that's been my experience.
I think that there's also an aspect to when you're setting up yourself for those first 40 days and what that discipline looks like. Part of the way that you can add in the devotional early on is that you plan for days that you eat cake. It's my son's birthday. I know I'm going to eat birthday cake on his birthday. So, how am I going to set myself up? Because that's in my first 40 days of this eating plan. You need to set up tiny habits, but you also need to plan in the devotional piece of I want to enjoy certain aspects in my life or relax a little bit for certain things. That's where you really need to start layering in while you're planning for that goal. I'm going to go away on vacation on that week. And that may mean that if you're doing even like a meditation practice, you're going away. So, how are you going to fit in that daily habit while you're traveling or you're going to be in different spaces? And that's the piece that the devotion and the compassion to self, that self love that I think can be missing when you really lean into the discipline aspects of going towards a goal. You may miss how you can layer in the devotion early on.
And that devotion piece is that's the creativity piece. Okay, if I'm committed to getting this done, how can I get this done? When I first started, and I was so heavy in the discipline piece, I wanted to get my meditation done first thing in the morning. The issue was that if I didn't get done first in the morning, I was anxious the rest of the day and nervous and I wasn't going to get it done. Hence, there's a lack of trust in myself. For me, one of the things, like you said, is focusing more on that planning stage. Okay, these are my 4 time points in the day that I can get it done. And my goal is just to get it done that day, not necessarily in some exact 24-hour time point. Yes, it did evolve to the point where, okay, let's be creative about how we get things done. I went to a yatra and it was a yogic yatra. And a lot of us had our own practices that we were doing, but we were in this space where we're getting up at this time. We spent time on the bus going to these different places. So we didn't really have the time always to dedicate to the practice. You want to know what? People are on the bus doing their meditations. Were you dropping it down to this massive meditative state every time? Probably not. However, we were creative enough to find the space to complete it because it's something that we were still invested in doing.
Another aspect of adding in the devotion is, or leaning too hard into the discipline, is that when you don't have your regular routine and you miss it, or you had that piece of cake, is it's all or nothing. I messed it up. I missed a day. I'm done. Versus, okay, I had the cookie or I had to get up early and I missed my meditation. And so I blew it. But
Yeah.
if you are caring for yourself, then you can say, you know what? Yes, I did miss today, or I'm climbing into bed right now and I realize that I didn't get to do X, Y, or Z. Is there a way for me to do an abbreviated version today? Or do I just need to make more space tomorrow? Yes, I ate that cookie. That doesn't mean that I need to continue to eat 5 more cookies.
Yeah, and that's huge, right? I have knocked down my meditation practices sometimes and not consecutively, but to let me just get 3 minutes in.
Yeah, and that flexibility piece and that care for yourself of what? This was a crazy day. It was an off day, and that's just fine. I can now make better choices or different choices right now. I don't have to wait till Monday. I don't have to wait till January 1st. I can make that choice right now. And that's what I think people need reminders about is that you always get to make that choice in the moment. You don't need to wait for something to get back on track.
Yes. You don't need to wait for permission. You can give yourself that permission. I think the other thing too is this is also a lesson in knowing yourself, knowing where do you lie on that scale? Do you fall into the more of, okay, I tend to be the all or nothing personality? Do I have a tendency to easily complete things but not enjoy them and not dive in and enjoy that moment? Or am I on the other side where I'll do it and I'll enjoy it, but man, I can't keep it up to save my life? That's a whole other piece, right? Because now your planning is going to be very different than the planning of someone who's able to get this done on a daily basis. And this planning may look more of, okay, let's dive deeper into the why.
This may be a good time for us to pause and split this up into 2 different episodes. The next episode, we will dive deeper into the why and how we can become more successful as we look at change and goals.
Thanks for joining. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow, subscribe, and share with a friend. Want to learn more about a specific topic? Drop us a line on our website and we can explore it deeper with you.